If you find something you love to do, then you won't work a day in your life. When you find the perfect job, the true fit for you, it's impossible not to get completely sucked in, to the point of making a difference in the field you work on. But when your love is found beneath the water, it's best to be aware, especially if you mean to brave the biggest sinkhole in the world. This is the story of a man whose heart belonged to the deep waters. A man of conviction and passionate for his job, Sheck Exley was an experienced diver, a pillar of the community and an expert on the diving community. However, the deep blue is an alien space, and no matter how familiar you are with it, it will never be home. Sheck Exley was born in 1949 in Florida, USA. From an early age, Sheck was infatuated with cave diving. At the age of 16, he entered his first cave, and then nothing could separate him from the depths. To finance his early career, Sheck worked as a math teacher in Sewanee High School in Live Oak, Florida. Everything Sheck did was to support his passion, diligently working to expand the field and bring innovation to the sport of cave diving. Exley was the first person in the world to log over 100 cave dives at the age of 23. In his whole career, he made over 4,000 successful dives around the world. Sheck had an unusual resistance to nitrogen narcosis, a condition similar to being drunk experienced by the over-inhalation of nitrogen. Nitrogen narcosis causes impairment of judgment and coordination, loss of decision-making ability and focus, vertigo, and visual or auditory disturbances. It can also cause tunnel vision, a condition that makes it impossible to read multiple gauges. Because of his extraordinary resistance to nitrogen narcosis, Exley was an exceptionally capable diver. He was also the first person in the history of technical scuba diving to dive below 800 feet, an endeavor that only 20 people have performed as of 2021. To say that Sheck Exley was a top-tier diver is an understatement. Sheck first met death on the bottom of the ocean when he accompanied two divers attempting the air-only depth record. In 1970, Sheck acted as the safety diver for the two men attempting to break the record for air-only depth. This is a tremendously risky dive, to such a degree that nowadays the records aren't kept or encouraged. When Sheck reached a depth of 142 meters, 465 feet, he couldn't go any deeper because of the effects of narcosis. Just below him, the two divers were already unconscious. Sheck couldn't reach them because he was already feeling the effects of the dive. The divers died beyond his reach. Certainly inspired by this episode and by his countless dives, Sheck Exley worked tirelessly within the community to establish rules and guidelines for safe diving. He penned 2 books on diving: Basic Cave Diving, A Blueprint for Survival, and Caverns Measureless to Man. He also became chairman of the American Speleological Society, specifically the cave diving section. In that position, Exley fought to make his guidelines the norm for diving, and notably, most of the safety procedures for cave diving used today were introduced by Sheck Exley. The most notable of his achievements was making the octopus a necessary piece of equipment on a diver's repertoire. The octopus is a redundant second-stage diving regulator that can be used as a backup in the event of diver's primary second stage fails, or alternatively, to allow the diver and his buddy to have simultaneous access to the diver's gas if the buddy has an out-of-gas emergency. By making this equipment a requirement on the cave diving community, Sheck guaranteed that divers could rescue one another in the event of an emergency. At 45, Exley decided to brave the Zacaton Sinkhole, the biggest sinkhole in the world in northeastern Mexico, accompanied by Jim Bowden as part of his El Proyecto de Bueco Profundo, the deep dive project. The Zacaton Sinkhole is the biggest known sinkhole in the world, with 339 meters of depth, just over 1,100 feet. The sinkhole has been used by NASA to test robots sent to explore Jupiter's moons and attract infinite interest from cave divers. On the day of the dive, Sheck and Jim were to dive separately, but at the same time, and using the same techniques. The divers set their weighted guidelines 25 feet apart from each other. Bowden went first, Exley followed. Their descent was estimated at about 12 minutes, a magnificent dive into the sinkhole. When diving like this, divers have to make a choice A faster dive means less wasted gas and is better for decompression, but it also risks the effects of high-pressure nervous syndrome, which can cause tremors, myoclonic jerking, somnolence, EEG changes, visual disturbance, nausea, dizziness, and decreased mental performance. A diver as experienced as Exley would have known all this by heart, so when he made the descent with Bowden, they'd previously agreed to make the descent at about 100 feet per minute after they reached the 680 feet mark. At 290 feet, Exley staged his air cylinder while Bowden used a pony cylinder carried on his back. On an exploration like this, air management is key. At 300 meters deep, 970 feet, the normal gas tank, usually full with 72 cubic feet of gas, is reduced to less than 2.5 effective cubic feet. Good for 2 or 3 minutes of diving, less if the diver is exercising. Both Bowden and Exley were experienced divers and would be taking slow, deep breaths to diminish the effects of the pressure they were under, which at this level would be the equivalent to 30 atmospheres. When Jim Bowden reached 874 feet, he stopped to check his cylinders. He had calculated for about 1,800 psi, pounds per square inch, left to make the climb back to the surface. He had only 1,000 left. When he saw this, Bowden turned on his buoyancy equipment and started his ascent. When he was making his ascent, Bowden looked at Exley's line. His decompression tanks were unused. Meanwhile, Exley, who had started his descent after Bowden, had surpassed him on the way down. The way divers go deeper is called free fall, and Exley, being an expert in the technique, went down faster than Bowden. While exploring below the level where Bowden was, Exley would have been under pressure equivalent of more than 30 atmospheres, which makes oxygen tanks worth for less than 5% of their capacity. In this deep dive, a lot of things can go wrong. The buoyancy equipment can fail, gas tanks can explode, divers can panic. In Exley's case, the latter was unlikely as he was one of the most experienced divers in history. Near the bottom of the Zacaton Sinkhole, Exley probably experienced an episode of high-pressure nervous syndrome. Convulsing and in nausea, Exley would have used his experience in his favor, tying himself with the guideline to help calm down his convulsions and stabilize his situation. From that point forward, it's hard to know exactly what happened to Sheck Exley in the depths of the deepest sinkhole known to man. When Bowden started resurfacing, he desperately started looking for Exley's bubbles. If he could still see the bubbles, Exley was still alive, and he could still be rescued. Bowden looked and looked and looked. Nothing. Sheck Exley's body was found on an expedition the day after the dive. The day after, an operation was staged to pulley up his body to the surface, as it was impossible for divers to retrieve him due to the excess weight of his oxygen tanks. When his body was removed, his mask and all other equipment was in place. He didn't have a regulator in his mouth. His buoyancy equipment contained gas, and the inflator was functional. Sheck's mounted wrist dive computer showed a maximum depth of 879 feet or 270 meters. Because Sheck's recovery took 3 days, autopsy revealed little about the actual causes of his death. After more than 4,000 dives, Sheck was an expert beyond doubt. The impacts of his work on the field of cave diving can't be overstated. It's an unfortunate accident and is still a mystery for the diving community. What led to Sheck's unfortunate passing? It only goes to show, even after a lifetime devoted to the depths, it's still impossible to call it home. What are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comments section down below. Thank you for watching this video. If you found it interesting, dive deeply into the like and subscribe buttons. See you again soon in another video, if you dare.